Hello, I am Grandmaster Mihail Marin, and I would like to share with you my impressions over the 12th round at the Candidates tournament. This was the round which consolidated Nepomniachtchi's win advantage over the field. His win in the tournament is practically beyond doubt already. But things happened on the board. The round was quite interesting. So we'll take the games one by one. First, Rapport against Caruana. We have this very popular tabia. It's quite interesting that this position looks so static. It was played in thousands of games already. And it may seem that it doesn't, that not much new can be found here. But actually, chess is very rich in content. And in the games played at the top, we can see that one of the players always finds some new or original approach. Rapport played now h3, which is not a popular move. Actually, when looking at Rapport's game, I have the feeling that when he prepares, he makes a search with 3, and step by step he chooses one of the lesser popular variations. He always tries to surprise his opponent and give the game an independent character, which is quite okay actually. The most popular move is knight bd2. By the way, in the first round, Caruana himself played like this with white, and by playing on 2 wings, he eventually managed to get some pressure. He won against Nakamura. Okay, white can be happy with what he has achieved. The rook on b8 is passive, b6 is not possible, and white already has pressure in the center. Actually, this is one of the ideas to break with d4. The other one being to break with f4. When playing h3, one can understand that white may not be willing to castle short. Most likely the king will go to the other wing. I say this because at his last participation, the candidates, Vladimir Kramnik, came up with a very interesting plan with black g5, and suddenly we feel that h3 is actually a target. That was a weakening move. He won the game brilliantly. So this is why I said that if h3, then we can expect that the white king will not go to that side. Now knight bd2. Okay, of course, knight takes e5 is impossible in this phase of the game. There is always this double attack winning. Now the most popular move is knight c3. The knight seems to stay passively there, but actually there is a possible regrouping. Knight d7, knight here. This is a game Anand against Kramnik. Of course, if white takes on e6, then we reach the same kind of position as in our game. The black knight stands perfectly well on e6. So Anand just returned. And of course, black now played the long castle. In the long run, he can think of attacking here. Well, if the knight comes here, there are no attacking chances on the king side because, okay, there is no king there. Eventually, Kramnik closed this game, but at this stage, his position is very good. But Rapport preferred knight d2, knight d7, and now again there were a few games, continuing with knight f1, which is the typical regrouping for the Spanish opening, for the Italian game. The knight is heading for g3. And of course, everything what white has done looks logical, but again, there is no target here. The king is not here. So it means that everything he has done resulted only into weaknesses. And the black is actually slightly better already. The game Nakamura Carlsen ended in a draw. But Rapport had his own ideas, he starts fighting against the enemy bishops. And now bishop takes b3 was a new move. I suppose that knight a8 deserves some attention, but anyway, in a game Sevian Radjabov, White got a slightly better position. Now he's ready to break with f4, which actually he didn't. He played too statically and eventually lost. But at this stage, White's position is more pleasant. Probably for this reason, Caruana made these exchanges, and now the knight is coming to e6. And in principle, this is a very safe position for black. I could call it a dream position if we think of this knight. I mean, the knight came here, then it had to step back because eventually this pawn was hanging. And well, there was still a question what the knight is doing. But now, after this exchange, the knight doesn't stand in the bishop's way. The knight is stable on a light square because White only has a dark square bishop, and so black also inhibits these pawn breaks. d4, the knight controls those squares, so these pawn breaks are not easy to carry it out. Knight c4, of course, that bishop was a bit irritating. Now there is no a4 a5 available, so knight c4. Now I can feel that this move has caused some problems here. We'll see a bit later. But at the same time, since White is going to castle, then the opening of the a file has some temporary importance. Queen d7, now h4. This move is slightly mysterious to me. Maybe Rapport thought that the last move was meant to prepare g5, because if queen here, then queen f7. But I don't think that g5 is such a threat now. Of course, knight e3 doesn't achieve much because the bishop is ready to exchange this knight. But maybe bishop e3, then take on b6, then knight a3. So somehow maybe g5 would be premature, but okay. h4 played after more than 20 minutes of thought. Maybe simply a plan to gain space, also to restrict the knight a bit by taking these squares under control. Of course, actually the pawn would go further. So it's not a bad move. It makes part of Rapport's way of thinking. And now a6. Of course, especially after h4, castling short is not what black would wish. And unfortunately, castling long is not possible because of knight takes b6. Now c takes b6 loses a pawn, and this simply allows mate. So a6 prepares this. h5, long castle, and takes on b6. Well, of course, White doesn't have anything better. I mean, this is a small achievement. Black pawn has been forced to move away from the center. But even though black structure looks a bit just a bit strange, it's not so clear that White has anything concrete. It's the hero of the game is this knight, which keeps everything safe. Well, in some endings or even middle games, the king would be very safe here. So actually these pawns are not that bad. Okay, the game went queen g4, just to see a bit the structures. g3, preparing for f4. Okay, the only constructive plan. In principle, the position is completely equal, and engines suggest such a solution. Knight here. Well, one possible reason why Caruana didn't play like this was that if ed, which is somehow desirable, allows this followed by g4. So black has to take with this pawn here, and then he has this weakness on e5. His structure is not so compact. But okay, anyway, after queen takes f5, there is a weakness here too. So the position seems to be quite equal. Of course, g6 preparing f5 under more consistent circumstances is a good move. The pawn is taboo, of course, because rook h1. So g6 attacking the pawn. Okay, black defends it, and now black is ready for f5, f4 already with some initiative. So f4 was forced. Black could also play f5 at once, but okay, he took here first. Now it may seem that g takes f4 is consistent, but actually these pawns on e4 and f4, well, they are not that strong, and they are under constant pressure. Actually, what are these pawns threatening? Of course, this is not a possibility, because then black has fantastic play along the ef file, and this is not that appealing either, because then this knight would be really a strong blocking knight. Probably black would fight for the light squares like this, and well, with such a knight on e6, I mean, I would already think that maybe black has some chances. Of course, this is a bit over optimistic, but with such a knight, black should be happy. So white tried to keep the play dynamic a bit. Okay, having a bishop, he has to try this, but the knight controls everything. Now if takes like this, it's true that this pawn is weak, but okay, there are some weaknesses here too along the g file. If so, this is a possible combination. Okay, queen c6. Black is so stable that he can maneuver however he wishes. No problems at all. Queen h3, and okay, of course now taking on f4 was possible, but it looks a bit scary because there is some pressure here. Engines suggest that this is completely equal, and it is like this because black retrieves the pawn. But okay, why should black go for this when his position is so stable? And the game eventually ended in a draw without very much happening further. Next, we'll have a look at the central game, Ren against Radjabov. d4. A small surprise. Now I would develop a bit the discussion I had when commentating the games of round 7 or 8. It was the game Ding against Firouzja. As mentioned there, I'm following Ding's games with great interest because in most of them he plays c4, invariably followed by g3, which is a repertoire I have written about, I have recorded about, and played it for more than 10 years, maybe 12, maybe 15. And it's quite a good repertoire, quite a flexible repertoire. It brought me good results. But there is one problem. If you play only this, you tend to become lazy, to play by instincts, and you risk to fail feeling the right moments to do something concrete, which doesn't have that much in common with the opening itself, but with chess in general. So you are closing yourself in a shell. So this is why against e5 and against knight f6, I have developed a repertoire which was published on Modern Chess in 3 parts, based on knight c3 on the second move, or if c5, then knight f3, not my usual g3, but knight f3 with d4 to come quite soon. Because at some point you need to induce yourself. I feel that you have to widen your horizon, your possibilities. You have to induce yourself to become more concrete. You play lazy chess, then, I mean, g3 is not really lazy, but it tends to make you lazy if you played it hundreds of times. So now, returning to d4, I will confess that I know the feeling. I play quite frequently d4 myself. I mean, in, I don't know, 25% of the games, because I feel that c4 sometimes is too much if you play only it. But I also know that getting out of the shell c4 and g3. If you have to be prepared for it. Sometimes it can be painful because you are used to this kind of automatic play. c4, g3, bishop g2, everything goes fine. You develop, you get castled. While here you play positions where there is a direct piece contact, and sometimes I feel that I'm not ready for this because I'm still in the shell. And apparently a similar thing happened to Dink, who lost this game very quickly. e3 is my favorite move with white against the Nimzo-Indian, just developing. As mentioned in the comments to previous round, here I like the move b6, which doesn't go for a direct pawn contact. There is a database, a repertoire for black in the Nimzo-Indian, where I analyze this, also published on Modern Chess. But anyway, long castle is one of the main moves, of course. And now d5. There was this game between Duda and Nakamura in a previous round, which I eventually covered, where black went for this position, which in principle I already I already like for white. I mean, I played this a long time ago, and there are possibilities here. But d5 somehow keeps the game very dry. Well, here I would only consider the move knight f3, normal development and so on. But of course, there is a lot of theory here. I'm surprised that c takes d5 is very popular nowadays. I don't see the magic. I mean, it's like the Carlsbad structure, the exchange variation in the Queen's Gambit, but with the bishop on c1. So this doesn't look that active for white. Okay, now knight g2 is the main. This is the main branch, but okay, a3 has been played many times, and now queen c2. Not the most popular line, but okay, quite popular. And now we reach an interesting moment, because in these lines with an early exchange on d5 and knight g2, it can also happen with the bishop here, and then the bishop goes to g2. This is another system. So the standard strategy for black is to just develop like this, and only in the moment when white plays f3, kind of threatening e4, then c5. Because okay, it's quite logical. Once white has weakened this pawn, he may have some problems activating black's pieces. Anyway, this has been played several times. Of course, white is going to castle long, and he has some attacking chances. But Radjabov played knight a6. Both players played very quickly until this point. And well, the remarkable thing is that knight a6 was introduced, if we can say so, because the variation was very rare at that time, by a player from the very remote past, Yefim Bogolyubov. The game was played 90 years ago. So what is the idea of knight a6? Well, it's a developing move, of course. It keeps this bishop open. And as we'll see, black intends to play c5 without waiting for f3, which is actually, let's say, of course, it's not a new concept because it was used by Bogolyubov, but everything that is well forgotten can be considered to be new. There was a game where white, of course a newer game played this year, white prevented this radically, but whenever white plays b4, he exposes himself to a5, and actually black has a very good game here. So knight e5 and c5, knight e2 and c5. And Dink had thought for a while on knight g2, but when c5 was played, he took instantly on a6. just for curiosity to show Bogolyubov's game. This was Jonar Bogolyubov in Bern, 1932. D takes e5 takes. And now in principle, white should have not hurried with b4, which actually weakens the light squares and wastes the tempo. Page 3, because there is always the danger of bishop takes h2. And now, okay, maybe a6 to forget about bishop e5. And then bishop e6. It's an interesting position with chances for both sides. White has the blockade on d4, but okay, what is this bishop doing? Jonar played b4, and actually now black could have used this tempo for playing knight g4. If so, then queen here. Rook f1. Well, now the engines are enthusiastic about knight h2. Of course, this is not easy to evaluate. But knight f6 also yields black an advantage, because okay, white cannot castle anymore, and the black is well developed. His queen actually does not stand that badly. It's not easy to attack, and if anything, it can sometimes go there, or maybe okay, sustain bishop f5. Bogolyubov played bishop e6, so he didn't use that moment. And now it's an interesting moment, which actually has some connection with our game, because white's main idea, if allowed, be to regroup his knights this way, and maybe this knight goes here, so he would have some chances. So maybe a6 made sense with normal play for black. There is this weakness here which counts, and okay, the knights don't stand so well now. So Bogolyubov played a5, and the paradoxical thing is that white should have actually ignored the threat on b4 to play, for instance, knight b5, or even castle, just to keep this square clear for the knight. After b5, suddenly black is better because there is no knight b5 possible. So suddenly black has very active play. Now queen h4 would have been the most active, but okay, Bogolyubov's move is also all right. At this stage, he's clearly better. Well, he eventually lost, but okay, it doesn't have any connection with the opening. So let's return to Ding's bishop takes a6, takes, and now b4. Actually, b4 is a bit on the edge, but we have to understand Ding. He's used to have his bishop on g2 on move 3 already, and now suddenly the bishop is missing. Of course, he has achieved some control on the dark squares, but okay, there are also some weaknesses. He would be so glad to have this pawn here and develop like this, and then maybe he would have some chances for something. But okay, there are also these two bishops, which after bishop d6 will be targeting the white king side. So used to have the pawn on g3 and the bishop on g2, you know that your king is safe, life is beautiful, okay, you try something positional, but okay, he was not used to that. And okay, of course he's a player with excellent chess understanding, but it's kind of unusual for him. And now, okay, b4 is not necessarily a bad move, but there was a correspondence game played in 2010 where white played like this, which is probably more consistent than before. Well, just to show that okay, one has to permanently have this sacrifice in view, but here it seems to be premature. So here knight d4, and in principle, okay, white has some some symbolic advantage, but okay, black is also quite active, and actually the players agreed on a draw here. Well, I assume that if this was an over the board game, the play would have continued, but okay, in correspondence chess they see that everything is drawn 0-0-0, so they are not interested to go for more. well, we see that white has a good blockade, but we can also notice the coordination of black's minor pieces. I mean, they keep several important squares under control and this pawn under pressure. So black is also well placed. Okay, before it's not bad yet, but it exposes now white to this move. And now b5, the same reaction as Jorers. Knight b5 might have been more constructive. For instance, here takes and just castle. I'm not so sure that that white has sacrificed the pawn, because actually b takes a6 is not possible. The threat is to take on b4, even if the rook goes away, so that ab, queen b6, queen b4, bishop a3 doesn't lose an exchange. Then bishop takes f6 is bad. So in principle, maybe black should just play b3, rook b8. He has some compensation for the fact that there is this control over d4. I mean, once again, he will play this, maybe f6 to restrict the bishop. This bishop comes here. I mean, he cannot really stand badly. It's a good position for her, but okay. b5, little by little, we feel that white is entering a dangerous territory. And now h3, which makes this feeling even clearer. Well, probably Ding saw that if he castles, then he simply loses a pawn. If a4, then okay, something like this can happen. So black maintains the tension. It's not very clear what will happen with the pawn on b5. Maintaining tension is not so simple. So h3 and bishop d7. Of course, he doesn't want to allow the knight to go to b5 and d4. And now b takes a6 was finally wrong. It just helps black to develop his rook. He could have tried a4, but of course, this is not a simple position. A takes b5. And now probably white should go a b5, bishop e5. But okay, this is a very tense position. It's not very clear which of the queenside pawns is stronger and which is a weakness. Maybe white has to go f4 to force bishop takes a3 to get the control over the dark squares, but then the square on e4 is even weaker than that on c4. So this is somehow the critical position, because if knight takes here, then suddenly black becomes very active. If knight goes back, then here queen a6, and if this, then bishop d3, and suddenly we see that the knights, which are supposed to block everything, are now under a big pressure. Actually, I think that black simply wins an exchange. Rook e1, bishop takes e2. Bishop c3 is slightly better, but then okay, queen c4 is unpleasant. If takes, knight e4. And okay, the blockade on c3 is not that stable, but the threat is bishop takes b5. Okay, needless to say, if white has to take here, then he's just lost. So this is already better for black, but I repeat here, white has a reasonable position. He's not in danger yet. Of course, black is quite active. I mean, this is also coming. Black has very active play. Okay, after bishop takes a6, you know how strange fate is, because you may remember the game Ding won against Rapport 2 rounds earlier. You know, there was this maneuver, this very mysterious rook maneuver. Okay, many commentators were so surprised. I never seen such a thing before. Okay, it's just a rook lift, which is typical for many structures, just connecting the rook with the king side, and okay, on c7 just controlling the c file. I mean, okay, it was nothing. Okay, it was elegant, it was good, but not something that never seen. And now with b takes a6, Ding allows somewhat similar maneuver. Actually, rook takes a6 is even more ambitious than the rook lifts on a 7th rank, because in some scenarios, you know, the rook could join a decisive attack. And now rook b6. The rook continues its maneuvers. Well, we see what happens on the Cohen side, and actually Ding must have understood what is going on. Because in the English opening, sometimes you have this, yes, you go a3, b4, you meet a5 with b5, and then, okay, after c6, for instance, bc, bc, you have this pawn, it's defended by the bishop, but the bishop is on an open file. If the bishop goes back, then, okay, you have to be careful not to obstruct the rooks. So, actually, the Cohen side situation is not good for white. So this is already problematic. For instance, if white castles, then after queen c8, it is not so easy to parry the threat bishop takes h3. For this reason, Ding played rook d2, but okay, move by move, it will be more difficult to get castled. Actually, now white really has problems. Well, first of all, taking this pawn is not possible. Okay, these are general exchanges, and now suddenly the move bishop a4 wins. The threat is rook b1, and this rook cannot come back to defend the first rank. So this just wins material. If castling, then of course this just wins. I mean, okay, it doesn't win because white may just admit that he has lost a pawn, but anyway, the position is is bad. So takes, now the threat is queen f2. If the rook moves, then bishop. Then we have the known mechanism. Probably there are other moves, but okay, when you see this, you just deliver this maneuver. So f4, knight g4, queen takes c3 was also good. Here, now knight takes c3, or this, I mean, okay, with 4 pawns for the piece, threats such as knight e3, and needless to say, the rook being ready to join. So f3, okay, this was already, when you have to do that, you understand that things are not that good. Queen c1, and now, okay, of course, almost every move, each move ensures black large advantage, but rook takes e3 is the most convincing. It just takes a pawn. Ding didn't take the rook and lost, resigned a few moves later. The combination is actually quite simple. If knight d4, queen e5. If rook d4, then rook takes here, and then okay, white is just lost. He loses material actually. If king d3, then bishop f5. It's not made because there is knight e4, but of course the game is lost. So Ding, the player who had won 3 games in a row and seemed to be in good shape, lost a game like this against Radjabov, who, apart from beating Nakamura, I believe, didn't do much in this tournament. Well, but it's this psychological trap. Actually, it can be a piece of advice for you and for myself. You have to be careful when you build up your repertoire. I mean, having something like this, it's wonderful. But you have to alternate it with something in order to avoid getting, too stuck into this structure. Because once you get out, okay, especially after an unusual move like knight a6, which most probably he hadn't analyzed. I mean, he might have had something like this, which is coherent, but knight a6, and suddenly the position changes so brutally. There is no right square bishop. Then you may have problems maintaining your perception of the position. So there needs to be some balance. You either stay in your shell, let's say c4, e5, g3, and if you feel that you are getting lazy and you are making too many draws, then okay, you can do things and analyze each of your game and ending in a draw and finding new ideas there, or alternate it permanently with something more concrete like c4, e5, knight c3, or simply d4. But what Ding did to just sort of course, he had played d4 earlier, but it was clear that he was very much into c4. Just to go like this for d4 and for such a structure, freeing black's play after c takes d5. This was, of course, very risky, and he was not able to react to the small opening surprise. Now we see Duda against Firouzja. This is a somewhat mysterious game. Okay, both. I mean, from the opponent's point of view, both players played quite quickly. Apparently, Duda spent some time here on bishop d3. Bishop e2 is another possibility. But otherwise, they were more or less blitzing. And actually, Duda stopped for a few minutes on 2 or 3 occasions. But Firouzja was just blitzing out his moves. Okay, we should evaluate this position. Of course, there are many possibilities on the way, but this is one of the theoretical positions. Well, White has a kingside majority, and okay, according to Steinitz and to many others after him, in the middle game, this is likely to offer White chances for an advantage. If he manages to play f4 and d5, then he has very good attacking chances. So you have to do something about that. And strange that Firouzja sought for almost a quarter of an hour on the move bishop a6, which is the main move. The idea is to prepare b4 somehow. So maybe he tried to remember lines, or maybe he forgot, but I cannot think that h3 came as a surprise to him. And now Duda took some time, probably also checking his analysis, and he went bishop e3. You know, in modern chess, we have this thing. I mean, if you didn't know that this is theory, if you're just told that this is the position, of course you would think that you would go bishop e3 and rook a d1, and later you think of f4. I mean, you say this and then you start to calculate. It's strange that the most popular moves are rook d1 when queen e7, but okay, rook d1. Sorry, what is this? So rook d1 when you actually want to go f4, it doesn't look right. I mean, and what is this rook doing here? Rook b1 is also a possibility. Then rook e8. Okay, rook b1 is more mysterious. Okay, prepares before probably. But okay, this is modern theory. You are stuck with the recommendation of the engines of certain generation. Of course, the engines become stronger and stronger, and eventually they come to the conclusion that the humanly normal moves are the best. But okay, in the meanwhile, we waste a lot of time by playing moves which are not principled. And we ask ourselves whether theory really progresses in all this time. So bishop e3, of course, is the main candidate. And black has to do something concrete. For instance, if he goes here, then rook a d1 here and knight e2, for instance. Now everything is ready for f4 and e5. White has a big advantage. So now b4. Again, after a long thought. This is quite strange because actually bishop e3 was not new. There were games like this. And okay, there are several moves of order possible. They all transpose. Rook a d1 now or a little bit later, but okay, the essence is the same. Of course, rook a6 is not serious. A takes b4. So what black had in mind was to sacrifice the exchange and have this pawn on b2. Well, of course, the position is very sharp because if white manages to play f4 and e5, then the game is over. Well, first of all, if queen c7, then this simply wins a piece. And queen c8 is no better. here, okay, e5 is very strong, but also bishop d4, keeping the pawn, keeping the threat in reserve. Because okay, white simply gets this pawn. He has the better structure, two bishops, and is crushing kingside majority. Sorry, so queen e7 is the only move. And now f4 doesn't work so well. Well, first I thought that maybe black wants something like this, but white may still be a bit better. Actually, he can do better with the queen on e7, e5, and now not bishop c5 because of bishop takes f7, winning, but simply taking this pawn and defending the pawn on b2, and the pawn on e5 is pinned. And if so, then okay, black is simply a pawn up. Look here, he has reasonable winning chances. Okay, things are not that simple because there is this trick. Of course, you cannot take the bishop because of bishop takes f7, queen c7. And now we have quite an interesting position. It's always a question whether the bishop on e5 is as strong as a rook. And the set is, of course, f4. This variation was played in a dozen of games, some 10, 8 years ago. For instance, Dubov Shirov was one of them in 2013. They will continue with c5 here and king h2. All the games ended in draws. But okay, I have the feeling that white should have some chances to play pawn. I mean, it's not very clear what black should do to get active. I mean, he has that pawn on b2, which kind of restricts white's possibilities. But okay, white has things to do. e5 is a possibility, bringing the bishop here. I don't know, maneuvering on light squares. In home analysis, you may found things for white here. And white didn't do anything wrong. Bishop e3 and rook a1 are actually very okay. It is strange that Firouzja didn't play c5, which is actually the only good move. He went for g5. He thought for less than 5 minutes on it, so probably he planned it in advance when calculating b4. I don't know, did he forget his analysis or simply didn't know that bishop e3 is possible at all? It's a bit controversial because now things are suddenly good for white. He's simply an exchange up. The pawn on c6 doesn't count. It's actually very useful for white because it allows the bishop's stability on c4. There is pressure here, and the counterplay on the king side is not that dangerous. Actually, knight h5 played after long thought was not that good. He should have tried to keep the position like this, even though just try to defend, stay like this. Even though, of course, white has winning chances. He can double rooks on the df file, whatever. Knight h5 is just trying to threaten something, but it doesn't really work. Queen e7. And well, now the best would have been something like king h1. Okay, this is natural. Rook f3, such a regrouping. f6, rook g1. Just look at the knight on h5. I mean, this is completely winning. There are some problems on g8. I mean, it doesn't take so long to threaten mate. Okay, black can simply resign. Finally, rook f2, which looks like a normal move, gave black some chances which he didn't use. Knight f4 was very interesting, and now, okay, we can feel that white didn't play king h1 in time, because now there is this threat not giving time for rook takes f4. Well, no, actually, if rook f4, no, rook g8 would not be that strong because rook f7, but okay, something like this. And only now it's okay. The check on c5 was important with the king on g1. So this position is not that clear. Queen takes a3 now, very important, so that here he takes here, and then white is lucky to have a perpetual draw. So we can see many changes of nuances in just, starting with queen b2 and knight h5 should have lost quickly. Suddenly in this position, he misses the chance to activate his knight. He went with the knight back to f6. And then, okay, the game entered this phase, which I said is clearly better for white. But okay, he did something wrong later. Okay, nothing happened until this point. Of course, white can consider defending this pawn. We see that black has transferred his knight here. It's a good square because somehow the knight is not hanging and it over defends here. But okay, if he wanted to sacrifice the pawn in order to get a control of the g file as soon as possible, then this would have been better. And here, okay, white is just winning. The black king is too weak, and it's just a pawn for the exchange. It's not that much. Rook g1 was a little bit worse, but even now he should have played rook here. Just to keep, just to defend g2. And okay, the point is that black cannot go f5 because of a very annoying check, followed by mate. Okay, instead of that, white went for a draw. I don't know if he blundered this or simply wanted to make a draw. But anyway, an interesting game. I tend to consider that bishop e3 and the whole, that this should be the best for white, and probably you have to investigate this position because okay, with time and patience and looking on the three-dimensional board, you probably can find plans for white. It's so stable on white squares, and there is this pawn majority which is ready to run. Finally, we move to the most disappointing game in the round, Nepomniachtchi Nakamura. Well, of course, Nepomniachtchi played very wisely this tournament. He took all the chances he was given and made all the draws he needed. For instance, he was clever enough to make a draw with Ding with white. Just to play for a draw, make a clear draw from the beginning. Because probably he felt that Ding is coming back. So he didn't want that Ding's comeback happens in the game with him, with Nepomniachtchi. So when I saw that these moves happened, I suppose that the draw would be after rook e1, knight takes e5. But okay, you have to play all the 30 or is it 40 moves before offering the draw. So that's kind of annoying, no? Once both players want the draw, why to go for that? So knight d6, and now I vaguely hoped for for a real fight in this variation. But no, d takes e5, a4, and still not clear how the draw should come up, but okay, there is this possibility. So they went for it. Well, I don't understand actually why Nakamura didn't try something, because it was clear that well, there seems to be a fear to play against the leader. Okay, Nepo has a lot of points, but it's a question whether he really played that well. Okay, there is no luck in chess, but he was in trouble in several games, and he scored well out of them. I would have thought that it's worth trying to, because Nakamura was not that far away from him the classification. But okay, each player knows best his own interest. So anyway, this looked like a dry round with three draws and only one catastrophic loss by Ding. But in principle, it was full of content. Okay, not this one, of course. So anyway, I wish you to enjoy the last part, the last two rounds of the candidates tournaments. I will try to do it myself.